going to draw it in, and I'm going to fetch this, make this just a little bit wider, just fetch it across the paper a bit more, and then make this side narrower and darker, so you get a more sense of light, so it's not too dark over here. So we're going to, I'll draw it in. Quick question. Hi Jan, breezy here in Spain. Yeah, it's breezy out there. What is the best watercolour paper? The best watercolour paper I use, and I've used them all, is Archer's Rough. Archer's Rough. Wait a second. It's gone blurred. Just get it out of its blurredness. There you go. Yeah, so I use Archer's Rough. This is a quarter of a sheet, and this is 140 rough. We use 140 Archer's Rough in the class. When I'm doing it at home, big ones, the bigger ones, I use the 300 pounds per square inch, or 600 grams. So Archer, you can try different papers, but for my style of painting, I tend to use a rougher paper because it suits the way I want to paint. Too smooth and it doesn't work for me. I find that the paint's just floating instead of dragging and stuff. So the best thing to do is try a few. When I started with watercolours, I tried them all. In fact, I've tried handmade papers from everywhere, down in Somerset where they handmade papers, and up in the lakes, and I've tried lots, but I always end up coming back to Archer's Rough. Right, we'll get started. So you want, like I said, I want a bit more light, so I'm going to fetch these buildings out a bit farther. So I'm going to draw it hard so that you can see it. You don't. So yeah, so I'm fetching these buildings out a bit farther up here, and then down. There's little balconies coming out, etc., like that, just coming out across, and then there's another balcony just there with a metal barrier on there underneath, like that, and then straight down like that. That's all right, no problem. Straight down like that to the bottom, and then what you've got now as well, when you get down, you want to be down to just below halfway, and then you've got blinds coming out, awnings coming out, and different sizes, different awnings coming out. I'll close in a bit while I'm drawing it, just so you can see. I'll just move the paper up and down. So you've got awnings coming out here, and then farther up here you've got a couple of broad awnings. So when you draw these in, because you're going down a bank, you're going down, the angle of the tops of the awnings and these down here want to rise, because your viewpoint is about here. If you stand up a hill, and when you look, and your horizon would be about here. So if every line wants to go to there, to that sort of area, rising, or if it's higher up, downwards to it. So these blinds here, these awnings here, that's not fully out, are like raised up as though they're going up there, like that. And then there's one coming out a little bit like that, and then there's two smaller ones coming out and down, sort of like that. We're not masking, we're just going to paint in everything loose. I know you like loose. Morning, Elaine. Right, so you've got this balcony here, and then if you look up here, there's another one, and you're looking underneath them as well. If you look carefully, you can see like underneath. So you've got a balcony bottom just there coming down, and we'll use shadows afterwards to emphasize them. And then you've got the railings going down and round there, and then you've got windows. We're not going to put everything in. It looks like they've got some kind of awning up there, but it doesn't matter. There's a balcony there, I know that. We're not going to paint in every window for window. We're just going to place them in. There's balconies there, and there's a balcony just above them awnings there. So there's a balcony just up there with railings, and there's one just there going out. And then you've got lamps kicking out. Let's have a look where the lamp is. Just look at the picture. Yeah, you've got a lamp coming out from around about that balcony there. So there's a little sort of lamp coming out down there. And then Also down there now, I'll just go back to the drawing. Also down there you've got some foliage just coming out across here like this. A little sense of foliage which separates the background from it down there. Right, at the back here, the castle. We're not going to paint this in dead strong. We're going to just make it look as though it's lost in the background there. So you've got the up part here. If I was you, I would only draw it in very light. I'm drawing it just slightly heavier, just so that you can see it. But I intend painting it in very, very loose. So I don't want to draw it in too hard myself, but I'm drawing it in just so you can see it. And then you've got the inner pillar coming down there, and then the outer pillar there like that. And that's a one there. So you've got broad pillars just coming down like that. And then you've got the arch round there, the darker bit in the middle, and a lighter patch just there, which you'll have to be careful and leave. And then you've got various little patches of light and shade coming down here to the bottom. And the road then goes around about here. So the road wants to come just where you below your blinds. So the roads are sort of coming up and rising like that. And then you've got that vehicle down there. Whether we need the vehicle in is another matter. We might not. Bits of broken wall and edges of gable ends here and there, and then there's the other tower just there, which will just sort of lose out into here, across there like that. So you've got that into there. Now we want the darker areas to come in, so we want this stronger roof down here, this under the roof coming down here like that, sort of sitting back on itself, going along there. And then you've got the other one just below. You've got a balcony just there. Again, it's got plenty of balconies. So you've got a balcony coming down there like that. Again, all aiming to one sort of point like that, your eye level. And that goes around the corner. And then you've got the roof underneath, coming up like that. This is underneath that gable end, then the darker area. So you've got the gable end just there. That's quite dark, so you can shade that in a little bit. And I'm not going to put that pole. I know the pole, I might have to, because the poles are actually needed for the tram, so I might have to put the pole in. And then you've got this dark coming down here, and about here you've got another lamp. So just sticking out there, just that little lamp. And then you've got balconies edges, which we'll just paint in as we go along. We've got a little stop-start sign there. And then this road carries on. Ignore the tram for the moment. This road sort of carries on up here and comes round here, and it comes round, the pathway comes round there like that and up here. I'll move it. I'll just zoom out a little bit, otherwise you won't be able to see the full drawing. So yeah, so the road comes up here like that, and there's a pathway there of which we'll have figures in. And your figures, because you're going downhill, the figures perspective obviously gets smaller as you're going down. So you want some taller figures, which are going to be here. There's a lady there walking down. Like that. And a man in the shade. These figures will go into the shade a little bit, so don't overdraw them. And then bit by bit, because they're going down the hill, the people go really down quickly. So they just sort of shapes and shadows carrying bags, etc. And they go down. Right. Up here you've got various darks and arches. We'll just put them in as we washing in. But I've definitely narrowed that down. It was just taking up a bit too much space. So the tram. Your tram wants to sort of be about, well, there's your awning, there's your balcony there, so it wants to be just, I would think about it, depends on how far up the road you want the tram to come. When you carry on down that road down there, you eventually come to the newer part, the newer part of Lisbon where all the posh cafes and things are. Up here is the older part where it's some nice places up here as well, markets and things. Right, tram. Just suggest that the top sort of patches of it that's going to obviously going to catch the electrics. Fetch it out across the top. Straight down. It's sort of an oblong type shape really, so you're fetching it straight down like that. Sort of draw the windows in. Don't be too neat, because I'm just going to very loosely put this detail. I'm not going to paint the tram in all its glory. Along here, and then obviously the wheels coming in underneath there. Linda, morning, sorry to be late, talking to the twins on FaceTime. Hi. Shirley, hi. Right, and then we would have obviously the tram tracks coming up there. We'll just put them in. So that's your tram, and it's bar coming up and across one. We'll just put flicks in to create them afterwards. Just lost my microphone, 1 sec. Microphone's just dropped off. Right, so over here, well, I'll put these blinds down. I think these blinds now need to go a bit higher, because otherwise they'd be lower down on the tram. So I fetched the tram in about there, which is fine for these, but I think the blinds need to be higher up. So I'm just going to suggest the awnings just go up a little bit more. So I'm putting the awnings just that bit higher. Otherwise, the people will be little dots down here. So instead of being the awnings down there, so here you've got figures. So you raise the awnings and therefore raise that banister and that banister. And the people want to be just sort of smaller suggestions of people. Just little squiggles into the picture. Maybe put one up here somewhere like that, because this side here is obviously far down, so these are balanced over here. She's quite taller when you look at her, so they're over there, shop's there, so we'll put these figures in as though they're farther down the street, and that these two here are farther up the street altogether, so they'll need to be a bit bigger or down a bit farther. So that's sort of the drawing that you want. Maybe the tram could just being a bit wider, just a little bit wider. But like I said, don't get bogged down with detail. That we're going to sort of paint these in very, very loose. I want these towers to be slightly distant, like we did with the I forget which one it was now. The other one. I'm saying right back to the picture. I can't get back to the picture. Oh, wait a sec. There we are. Right, back to the picture. So I'm using a big brush, the mop again. This is the smaller size mop, but the big one would take over totally. And we're going to come down through the sky and wet it in, and gradually add yellow ochres in and little wet washes down to here, and let that dry. So you want a nice watery French ultramarine, very wet, not too strong. Change over to some yellow ochre separately, so you get some yellow ochre. Again, wet. You can drop stronger in as you're going along. And we want to add a little bit of sort of grey into that, so a little bit of neutral grey, just separate, just to drop in so it tones it down. I don't want this to be bright yellow ochre, I want this to be the lighter part, so I'm just going to add a little bit of grey into there. And this is sort of like a neutral grey, which I've been using. The Payne's grey is a bit too blue for it. This is just a nice sort of dark grey. It doesn't impose itself. Right, so you've got your brush, get your French ultramarine, in for your sky. Doesn't matter if you go into these a little bit, don't worry about it. Doesn't matter for definite over there, that's going to be stronger. Come down through your buildings. I'll zoom in a little bit because you're not bothered about the bottom part at the moment, are you? So I'm coming down through the buildings, down the side of that, through the tree, like that. Fetching it down through there, like that. Leaving it a little bit lighter just over here where that wall was. Just leaving it a little bit lighter over there. Now then, get your yellow ochre and drop your yellow ochre in and just let it sort of float upwards into that area there. Morning, Eric, you alright? Hi, Alison. If I don't answer straight away, it's because there's about a 20-second delay from Amazon onto here. I'm looking at other means as well at the moment. So into there like that, fetching this yellow ochre. Now you can tease it up to. It doesn't matter if it runs into the sky because you are going to add to it. But what you want to do now is get this neutral grey. Get this neutral grey. Just a bit strong, that. That's it. Just get that and add that to your yellow ochre. Fetch it round your tram, round the top of that car, and then just finish it down out to suggest awnings out there. So you just leave a little gap to suggest awnings out, and even a little flash of light here and there. Just leave the gap so it suggests that there's something else going on down there, down the road, and then just drop that in round there. That should be drying fine. I'm just going to take the excess water out down there because it's just pooling a little bit. So I'm just going to use the brush, dry the brush off and just get rid of the excess. So little bits of light here and there, like flashes of light, are fine. They all add to the whole effect of the sunshine casting shadows, etc. on it. We will darken this down, but I'll need to allow it just to dry a little bit. So what you can do now is put some washes in here, but we'll obviously steer clear of that. So you're going to use the yellow ochres nice and clean. And I would actually, so we get a sense of light, use a little bit of cadmium yellow here and there. I'm just putting a little bit of cadmium yellow, very wet, just down here. So we can drop in a suggestion of sunlight into this. And we want the buildings to look whiter, so we're not going to paint it in solid. We're going to leave highlights of light catching it. So get your yellow ochre, big brush, start up here and just flick down into it, so you're just creating little patches of light. It doesn't matter that you leave gaps, that's fine. Just stay away from your sky. So you're just dropping these in like this down to your areas down here. Drop a bit of the yellow in a couple of spots. It's just really while you're dropping in wet, just to get a sense of sunshine onto it a little bit down there. Now as you're coming down, darken your yellow ochre down a little bit, add a bit more strength to it, and come across your top of your awnings, allow that to bleed upwards into it. You can drop some underneath the shadows under there, so you can drop some stronger bits of yellow ochre here and there. You can see how much water's on by the pooling just there. So above the awnings, down the side of the awning, like that. Same with these awnings here. You go just across the top of them and flick down through them and just leave a sense of light. Go underneath them, underneath that one, underneath them two. Fetch that dark down. So you've got that awning just through there. Yep. That's it. Down through there, and then just flash into it and leave some little bits of light, which can be. Wait a sec, I'll move it up a bit. Which can be figures. So you just leave a little sense of light, and you take that light, that colour, down to the pathway, and you drag that through there, and you can drop, like I said, you can drop little senses of colours into here. You could even drop some pinks in, I suppose. Some nice shades on them stones. I'd have to get I'll try a little bit of red, but I'm frightened of using red. I think it has to be very wet, but I might just drop a little sense of pink into it, like that. What you can see is the lamp. I can't see it on my picture, but I can see it on the screen that the lamp is shining that paper out, something stronger. Right, dry your brush off. Be careful if you've got any water down the sides here on the table, like that. Can you see? So lift that up, dry that off, because what will happen is, as the wash dries, that water off the table will run back in and give you the cauliflower. Right, this is still wet, but we can work on it. So you can use a slightly smaller brush. I don't mean dead small. Something round about this size here, like this. Right. Get your yellow ochre, the drier bit that you've had. Add a little bit of the neutral grey to it, so you just grain it off a bit so it's not dead bright yellow ochre. We want this to be the bright, we want this to be slightly stronger, as though it's going back over. So just a little bit of more grey into that. Come down, and I mean all these paint, when you're doing them loose, are done fast. Come down into that. It's nearly dry. It doesn't matter too much, but just drop in this yellow ochre grey just to suggest the little bits of castellations on the top. It's still a bit wet. You might have to do a bit more afterwards. It's still a bit wet, but never mind. So you're dropping that in. You're coming down round the outside of where your light is going to be. So you're leaving that just lighter, coming down there like that. Get just your grey, just your neutral grey, and flash that around a little bit in some spots, just while it's all wet, just so you create a sense of shape and shadow. You're just creating these little flicks up into there. Down it. Now as you're coming down here, you want these shapes to get strong, but just loose flicks like that. Sounds like a country and western singer. Just little flicks of light and allow shadow and light to mix together. As you're getting farther down, you can add more grey into this mix. More grey and yellow ochre. So as you're getting farther down, you can add that, and you can drop that in stronger. Go under the lighter patches that you left and just drop that in. There's a car there. I don't know where to put that car. Well, we'll leave it in. So you're dropping these bits of greys in quite strong. Now you can go now and get a little bit of Payne's grey. Get a little bit of Payne's grey, and you can drop that in the bottom to create shadows down there. So that you're getting a feeling of the building, of you going down into the shadows sort of stuff. So you're just angling that down like that and just creating these shadows. We'll add some little bits of detail into it, but you don't want it to be dominating too much. I'm just going to add a little bit of the yellow ochre and the neutral grey back in a little bit darker, and just flick down some suggestions of pillars here and there. Just inside them pillars, just like that, just inside them. So you're just creating that sort of sense of shadow of the pillars. That's all right. We'll add detail to it, but nothing dead heavy. Going round your tram. Just round the light. Leave the light out. I missed that light out. I'll have to put it in afterwards. So down there. So fetch that down like that. A little bit of light here and there. It's running a little bit up here, but it not matter. We'll add a sense of detail into that up there afterwards. Just want that. It's still a bit wet over that side. I'm going to go over and darken down here. I'll just zoom out so that you can see the whole thing. So I'm going to go over here and darken this area down, but I'm not going to get to there. I'm going to make that darker, but I'm not going to get to there, otherwise it'll all just run into that. And for that we'll use French ultramarine. I've got some burnt sienna there. You can use a little hint of crimson, but not much. It wants to be mainly on the sort of the bluer side, but greyed off. So you want plenty of burnt sienna in the blue and a little hint of crimson, but you don't want to be dead bright. And we're going to put in a shadowy area down here and gradually go up to that edge, but leave it white. So you've got a lighter edge up there, so you can start on the roof. So you can start. Wait a second. Where's the picture? So you can start here, this area here. Just start there and then come down. I know it's light. I'm not making it light. You should know me by now. Right, so under the roof there, like that, nice sort of bluey grey. Take it up into the building there. Big brush so that you're covering it quite quickly. So you're fetching this down. Well, what you can do is add if you've only got the paint screw, add a little bit of burnt sienna into it, so it just tones it, takes the blueness out of it a little bit, Gillian. So down here like this. Now while you're doing this, just start adding stronger bits in. So I'm just going to add a bit more stronger burnt sienna and blue, and just drop that in the top like that, and just as long as you're dropping stronger colours in and just pulling a suggestion, and even some burnt siennas just by themselves, so you're just pulling down, and you get that way you're getting a variation on these colours. So a little bit more burnt sienna in here and there, so you're just varying them. Coming down here to these figures, and just stop just above the figures and just sort of flicking around them. We could use masking, but I've decided we'll just that's alright. I've decided we'll just take a chance on it. And then a few sort of flicks down as though there's figures just down there. Carry on with this wash. Don't allow this wash to dry on you. If you're dropping anything into it, browns or blues now, it has to be stronger. And you can just slash a little sense of shadow across them people there. Right. You can see the puddle, can't you, on the light there? You can see the puddle of water just there. I'm just drying my brush off, and I'm just going to soak that up a little bit. To be quite honest, I'd have waited till that was dry and then joined them up, but we'd have been sat waiting for that to happen. Now then, while that's still wet, get the strong blue again. Get the strong blue, burnt sienna, and you're going for strength here, and you can add some crimson in. You're going for strong colour, hardly any water, just straight from the pan there. And what you're going to do is just suggest some real darks into here. So you're going to suggest a darker edge up there, a little flick out, sort of under the gutterings, what you're after. Dark up there like that. Pull this one down darker with a few sort of individual strokes. Sorry, just dry this off so it doesn't run back in on me. So pull some individual strokes down here and down here, so you're just sort of suggesting doorways and windows just down here, and then one or two finer ones just down there. All this will run in together, but you're going to get a sense of shadow and the feeling that there's windows down there. We'll add more sharper bits of architecture as we go along. I think that's fine. Allow that to dry off, and then what we'll do is we'll blend this wider area into it so that that's sent backwards. But can you see that just flicks around here, just flicks of light to suggest slashes where people will be added individually afterwards. And we'll take this shadow across here. What I'm going to do is run a wash into here, just giving these time to dry a bit. I'm going to run a wash into here for the road, and I'm just going to use. I've said use neutral grey. If you haven't got it, I'm just going to try Payne's grey with a little hint of burnt sienna into it, just so it's not so bright. See if that works the same as the neutral grey. I think that looks alright. I just didn't want anything too strong. Now, to get it to feel lighter, start with just water down here, and I would leave a gap so just in case that's still wet, so the water doesn't fly into it. So leave a gap and just put the water through there. I've deliberately left a little bit of grey into it so that you can see it. Round the tram, fetch this back up into the path as well. So you're just fetching that back up. Now as you're getting back up, start darkening, start adding your bluey greys into it. Don't forget you're going to put a really strong shadow here and there afterwards, but you're just sort of getting a blend into this. Get some wet yellow ochre. Get some wet yellow ochre and just drop a little bit of wet yellow ochre in down the bottom area and in up to where the path is. So you're just adding a little patches of light here and there. Carry on with your blues, add your blue, add some crimson and burnt sienna. Eventually you're going to make this as dark as that, but at the moment you just need to get a sense of it getting slightly darker as it comes up. All done while it's wet so that nothing flows, and you can just sort of flick in a sense of pathways etc. into there. And just keep it going, don't allow it to dry on you. I'll zoom out a bit more so you can see the whole thing. And gradually in this top area, stronger blue, crimson, burnt sienna. So it's got to be done while it's wet, but as you add to it, your brush wants to be stronger and drier than the wash. If it's wetter, that's when you get the run backs. So you get that into there like that, and then just dry underneath. You can't see it, I don't think, but just dry underneath onto the table, so that the water doesn't run back off the table into your wash. I think that's looking right. I've got a big lump of brush just there. I'll get that after. If any bits come off your brushes, and I've seen people do it, don't try and get it. Don't try and get it while it's wet, because your brush will end up damp and you'll end up making a cauliflower in there. Let it dry, then it'll come off. So I've got the dark in there, and you can see how, because we added burnt siennas here and there, you can see how it's drying in patches, which is what you want. And then we added a strong suggestion of shadowy windows, which is all you want. We'll add little bits of architecture, so we'll add a suggestion of balconies here and there, down there. But you want that stronger, so this has the sense of light over here. I think that's dry enough. You're looking up underneath, and you're looking at underneath balconies and windows. We want to suggest shadows of these onto the walls. So what you want is just the same, this sort of burnt sienna grey feel. So that's burnt sienna with Payne's grey, or a neutral grey if you've got it. And you're just going to suggest shadows, so you're just going to flick underneath like that to suggest balconies. edges under there. That's fine. Now then, you want to make it look as though the shadows are being sort of pulled across the picture a little bit, so they're getting cast a little bit. So you're just flicking in and creating shadows. Just loose flicks, loose flicks. Get a little bit of wet yellow ochre and just trail out some of that grey, a bit more water. Trail out some of that grey so it just washes out a little bit. So you're creating these shadows and you're just flicking with the brush just to create the illusion of little bits of architecture, little bits of balconies casting shadows, and that comes down to just above your awnings here. So that comes down above there. A few loose flicks here and there. That's it. So leaving the white there, we'll now go underneath these awnings with a smaller brush and make them darker in places. So you want a strong colour. So you use, I'm going to use the same colouring as over there, so that you've got continuation. Maybe warm it up with a bit more crimson into it. So it's quite strong, this, and you're just going to go underneath and shape your awning. So your awning, them ones that's partly closed, come out like that and down, and then there's just a little flick in between, like that. Pull it down like that, go underneath it like that, so you're emphasizing it. Do the one just next to it. It doesn't matter if they're not the same size or in the same place. It's all just quickness and looseness. So suggesting underneath some of these awnings here, and that would go out over there, but that's wet, so I'm just steering away from it. So you've got the dark just coming down there like that. Now before that dries on you, just get a bit of water and get a bigger brush, to be quite honest. I'm going to use a big brush. Get a bigger brush with water and just wet it out a bit so it's a bit watery, and just slash down and create some shadows off them darks. And just stopping above some of your figures just to leave a little bit of light into them. So can you see how you're creating strong shadows off these awnings? If the stronger one stays too powerful and leaves a harder line, just go in with your brush, blend it and pull it out so that the line, you don't want a solid dark line. So if it does stay solid up there, go in with your brush, pull it and pull it down and flick that down, and just flick around to create a sense of shadow and light catching the place. So you're just flicking in and out like that, just creating a sense of light into there. And leave that alone. What we want, we'll eventually fetch the shadow across and up the wall a little bit. Just checking. This is fairly on the dry side now, so I think we can add a little sense of detail into this. Nothing strong. I would get your brown and burnt sienna, your Payne's grey and burnt sienna, or a neutral grey if you have it. Just a neutral grey there, like that. Move your sleeve up. Be careful because this might be wet. Just come into the tops and just drop some little darks here and there, just to suggest the castellations on the top, like that. Now before they dry, you don't want to let them even think of drying. Get your yellow ochre and pull them down and away. We're not looking for massive detail, we're just looking just to create this shadowy feel of the building. Go back to your greys, because that's getting a bit bright. Go back to your greys and come round the outside of your buildings with your greys. And leave little patches of light. Wait a sec, I'll zoom in. Leave little patches of light. Don't feel the need to paint this in dead solid. And don't feel the need to get this highly detailed. That darks will dry paler. And go around the arch, and we'll darken the arch down afterwards. So you can go around the arch like that. Down there. And you're using just the grey now. And you're just flicking in a little bit under the archway there, like that. Leaving some light and just dragging bits of greys wet. That's going to be the foliage there, isn't it? Dragging little bits of grey and just pulling some down to suggest the pillars that's coming down, like that. Right, so you're suggesting the pillars that's coming down. There's a little sense of something going on just there, into there. And then before these pillars dry, just flick through them. So you're just breaking it up and creating a sense of shadow and light catching parts of it. So that's all you're doing there, just creating that sense of shadow. And as you get to the bottom, darken it in a lot stronger. And just do the same thing. Just paint some sort of shapes up as though there's shops down underneath here. So you're just going underneath and painting a sense of shape like that, making it darker along the bottom of the road, not touching this lighter patch. And then just, say again, just flicking through, join it up to this area here. Leave that pitch bit just a bit lighter, so just go down that side there with a bit of the grey. That's fine. What you're trying to create is shadow and atmosphere down into here. We'll put some little figures down in there afterwards. We'll give it scale. That's what you're trying to do. You're trying to create a sense of shadowy going down into the street. The sun's over here. It's all in shade down there. So do the same over here in this one. Just a few little sort of flicks just to suggest the castellations. Drop a little bit of yellow ochre into it to lighten it in parts. And then go back to your sort of your grey and just flick in down, create some shit, and then you can create the top of that white gable end by just lifting that up to there. And I'm just going to drag odd shadow through that gable end so it just looks as though it's tied in with them. So I haven't made it bright white, which if you look at the photograph, the bright white, it draws the eye too much. So I've just sort of suggested it with the yellow ochre which we had originally, and then just flick through a few little bits of shadows into there. This is looking fine up here. We will emphasize parts and darken bits down, but what we've got up there is a sense of light and shadow casting. I'll just join these together a fraction. I'll just make that castle look as though you can see it there, so it hasn't got a load of white just sticking out. We'll sharpen up some of the shadows, and we've got some little flicks of foliage to put in there. So I think that's looking all right. I'm not too sure about the vehicle in the background. I think it might just distract. I'm just going to tone it down. I think it might just distract from this. I'm just toning that down a fraction and losing it. Then the focus will be on the tram. All this is doing wet in wet. If you're doing these pictures, you can continue on. It's just a matter of letting a little bit dry and then going back. But always you're just working with colour and letting them run together in places. I mean, I think the shadows look quite nice just underneath here. Well, we'll put some emphasis in and some sense of figures, but I think we've got the sunlight catching these shadows here. And then we want a dark shadow across here and off the tram up the side a bit. Just wait and see how it's drying out on me. Still wet. I don't want to run into this one because that's wet, and so I'm going to have to let that dry just a little bit more. And that, because I want to put that foliage in there. So what we can do is come over to here and using a little bit of crimson and blue So you're just going into your mix that you had, but just making a little bit more crimson in. And you're just going to create a sense of little windows here and there. Just a few flicks from underneath the balcony, so just sort of a few shadowy flicks down here and there. That's it. And then you've got the biggish one coming, some biggish ones coming down into this balcony area just here. So you've got some broader ones just coming down to the top of that balcony. You can go off the top of the paper. So there's another one just there. Angle them down so that they look as though they're going, you know, it gives you the impression of going down the hill. Maybe a third one there. They don't have to be, you don't have to have these exact as what you see on it, because all you're after is a sense of it and an atmosphere. So there's quite a darkish shadow just under that bit sticking out there, like that, into there. Just let them run in like what they want. And then you've got one or two down here just coming out from underneath the bottom of that balcony. Just, it's all wet and watery, so that's how you get. And then this one comes, some windows come down to this balcony here. And now, because you're getting a low level, they start to rise slightly up. They're coming down over the angle because of your perspective. These are low down, so they start to rise up a little bit as opposed to going down. So you've got to imagine that there's a horizon line there, and all lines are aiming towards that horizon line. That's how you get perspective. If you draw them down or them straight, then you wouldn't have it. And then you've got some smaller windows just here, so just a little flick to suggest some smaller ones. That's it. We're building it up. We'll darken little parts down, but we're building up the softness of this picture, and then that's how you want these pictures to be, soft, but with some hard accents here and there, and that gives you variation on the picture. I think that's still wet. I'll just leave that as it. I'm going to put the shadow across the road here. I'll zoom back out a little bit. So I'm going to take the shadow under the tram across here, and I'm not going to carry it right up. If you look on the building, you see the shadow going right up. I'm just going to leave it as though it's just coming out here. Otherwise we'll lose the light around here. So maybe an odd stronger shadow, and then leave a bigger gap, and then a stronger shadow here, but not coming right across. So I'm just going to use a smaller brush, and I'm just going to use the burnt sienna and the Payne's grey again, or a neutral grey if you have it. A little bit of blue. That's why maybe the Payne's grey works. A little bit of blue. It wants to be strong. It wants to be strong, this shadow, to make it look as though there's really strong sunshine. So I've gone back to blue and burnt sienna and just making it strong. Now you come under the tram, but what you've got to do is leave a gap for the wheels, so that you want to get a sense that you can look underneath it slightly. So fetch this shadow down at the bottom of the tram, like that, and take it across the picture, and then just lose it out. Right, and then leave a gap. Take that so far across. Now you need to go to a bigger brush now. So you need to be using the same colours but with a bigger brush. You come up the curb, flash into the pathway a little bit like that, but run some little bits of yellow ochre into there so that the pathway's just got a sense of light onto it. Like that. And now you're going for your blue, burnt sienna, crimson, strong, and you're joining this wash up. So you've left a gap, you're joining. Right, So you've got this dark in here like this, and you get stronger and drier as you're coming up to here. So it's stronger and drier over here. Blue, burnt sienna, crimson into there, and just leave a sort of a sort of a few flicks as though there's little bits of chimneys or little bits of architecture on the top here and there. So it's not just one thing, so you're just suggesting little bits of architecture or chimneys. I'll zoom out a bit more so you can see it. Into there. I think what you can do actually is take this shadow across farther up, so as though there's another bigger building just here. So I'm going to drag this shadow out a little bit farther and just break that up there. There's a big pool of water just there. The problem is if you get big pools of water and you don't lift them out, as this wash dries, the big pool of water decides to go and have a talk to it, and that's when you get your cauliflowers. I think that's nice and strong. So you've got a full sense of shadow now kicking across to here. We'll emphasize some sense of building windows and doors underneath here, stronger balconies, etc. This is dry now, so I think we can put in this building here. And I don't want that to be, I want that to be dark as well, because I want it to feel as though that's lighter and that's lighter. So I'm going to darken this building down and match it into that. So I'm just going to use the same colouring. I might put a bit of light up in the top. I'm just going to come underneath for like the eaves. Like that, just suggest it down. There's a bit of balcony up there, which we'll actually put the balcony in, but just stay level with the picture for the moment. Under that doorway there. We'll add something into there afterwards. We'll add a little bit of colour into that. I don't want to take it all dark, but I don't want it to be bright white, so we'll come back to that. So you've got this sort of bottom of the balcony just sticking out like that, and then coming down here. It's running in a little bit over there, but that's fine. We'll sharpen it all up afterwards. Round that sign there, well, nearly round the sign. Down round the outside edge of the tram and down to join here. Now, just get a little bit of your burnt sienna blue dryer, drop it in and push it back up. As long as you've got it drier, this colouring drier, you can push it back up into this other wash. So it's dry colour straight from the pan, and I'm just going to suggest little bits of balcony edges sticking out here and there. That's running up there, but we will tidy it up. You will get runs into these things when you're doing it. I'm just blending that in. Dry brush and just suggest some back in with some sort of narrow windows just down here. So I'm dipping into blue and burnt sienna, but actually more burnt sienna from the look of it. It's virtually dry brush. Blending them in and come up the top and do a stronger balcony. There's a strong sense of balcony just under there. So really strong blue and burnt sienna. No water involved here, it's just pure pigment coming out from there back into the balcony, and then just pull it down fairly dry and just drag it around a little bit, and then just suggesting some more windows just coming down into here, into here. Like that. One or two sort of flicks just to suggest little sense of architecture. Make it dark, make it darker up there, You'll put some fencing there, but make it darker to look as though there's doors and windows coming down to that. So bit by bit you're just adding this little sense of windows without actually having, and it's this big brush just shaping to a point. Can you see that's my hand? I've run out of tissue now. I've just got a soggy mess. So just the thing with these mops is it's brilliant. I'm just going to move it away from the pictures. I don't drop it. But can you see how you can squeeze it to just a pure point? So you can have just a point with these mops. Now it's run in there a little bit, but I've deliberately put that in there so you can see what not to do. I'll peel that out afterwards when I can find some tissue, unless I get a dry brush. Get a dry brush and blend that out a little bit. That's all right. Nothing substantial there. Nothing to see here, folks. That's still a bit bright blue, so I'm just going to drop a little bit of dryish burnt sienna here and there, just to suggest that there's narrow windows going on. But we're going to add architecture, sense of signage and balconies out here as well. But we've got the whole concept. These figures will go in, and we'll lose that white when the figures go in down here. But you've got the whole concept of dark shadow and the feeling of distance. Can you sense the feeling of distance down here? And I like the light over here. This is what I wanted. I didn't want to take the shadow right across as in the photograph, because I think it would just be too much. Right, I'm going to put that that's right. I'm going to put this sort of sense of foliage. There's a bit of foliage just there. So you can use a longer brush. I've got narrow brushes here, but the longer ones, the narrow. These are the Da Vinci Maestro ones, which I really like. That box came about a week or so ago, I think. Box of 4. The very nice brush. The longer, but they're good for just flicking. So I'm going to put the foliage in. And I'm not going to make it bright green or anything like that. I'm going to actually use crimson, trust me on this, crimson and blue, more towards the blue side, like that. And then I'm just going to get some cadmium yellow separate, and we'll see what happens. We want a clean edge down the side of this white wall, so we'll go with the blue and the crimson. Got to be careful because this is soaking wet and I'm leaning right onto it. So it will just go down the side of that white wall with the blue and crimson and create the wall down there. Comes out for a couple of these awnings. Down there, under that awning and down there. Right, so you've separated that wall from there. Now you just flick out as though, with an upright stroke, just flicking out to create a sense of foliage. Like that. Get your yellow, wet, and drop that in and flick that around as well. So I'm using the brush just upright and just sort of flicking in. And little bits of light coming through are fine. Just broaden it out a little bit down the middle and then take it back in. And that really now pushes that back and lightens that side up. So I've used blue and crimson and then just dropped a yellow in, so it didn't become too bright. That's the main worry with these, is you get it just a bit too bright. Apparently I get 10% off something. Right, so we've got that. I'll just move that brush out the way a bit. The tram. You want a nice bright yellow for this tram, and trust me, you're not going to paint it in detail. So a nice strong yellow. I'm actually going to add some yellow ochre into it so that it's not so bright. I don't want it to be dead bright. I want it to feel as though it's in the shade of it. So I'm adding some yellow ochre to it. This is wet, so I'm just going to leave a gap before this blue. I'm just going to come down the left hand side and leave a gap so that it doesn't run into the, I'll zoom in, sorry, I'll zoom in for you. I'm coming down the left hand side but not touching into where the blues were, like that, with the tram. Take it across so far just above the window, take it across so far just underneath there. Wet your brush and just sort of slash into it a little bit. And then use water just to take that yellow across to the other side. Just leave little patches of light. Don't feel the need to fill it in constantly. Just leaving patches of light across there. And then you can go back in with the darker yellow ochre and just drop a little bit more stronger just over on this left hand side a little bit. There's a little bit of yellow just running in there, but that's fine. So you drop that in there like that. What I would do if your yellow goes across too much is just to get some water and just drop water in on the right hand side, and it'll push the pigment back a bit so that it doesn't become too much. You want to get a feeling of roundness to this tram, so it's a lot darker over here with yellow ochre and yellow, and more water over here. And I've left gaps so that you get a sense of shape and shadow to it. I haven't made it solid, but it made it look as though it's rounder. We'll put the tops on that in after we've dealt with everything around here. So I think the tram's looking alright. We can't touch the underneath or the top of it yet. It's just a bit too wet. So we can get a smaller brush, and you can actually put in the detail up here into this archway. A little bit of the neutral grey. Or burnt sienna if you haven't got it. Burnt sienna and Payne's grey. Just a little bit. And you want to just slightly darken down the right hand side. Make it look as though it's going down the corner a bit. So it's going around the corner. Just paint some in and then wet it out so that it doesn't become too solid. Just wet it out. And just get that sense of it going around the corner. And you fetch that down towards your foliage really, and that emphasises that edge. Do the same on that side, just a little bit darker on the right hand side, so you're just suggesting a darker side to that tower. Now go into the archway with your grey, burnt sienna and French ultramarine, burnt sienna and Payne's grey, or just a neutral grey. You don't need to paint every little flick into here. What you can do is just suggest one or two little flicks like that, just a slight gap between them. So just one or two flicks. Darken it down this side with your flicks. Just pull it down quite quickly and darken down that side. Grab some of your yellow ochre. Grab some of your yellow ochre wetter and just paint into that round the archway, round the left hand side, and just angle it across into that dark, and just leave a sense of shadow, a sense of light on part of it, and then just drop with your grey back in at the top. So you're just dropping the grey in there very loose up to there, so you get a sense of darkness. Come down the side with the yellow ochre and your greys, and just suggest the little bits of architecture just there, and a few little flicks just down. Don't get bogged down with detail too much, just a few little flicks like that. Leave a gap of light and just go underneath it like that. Wet your brush and just pull that shadow away a little bit. Break it up. And then you just need, I think, just to strengthen the same colour as what we did there. I think we just need to get a little bit of shadow down that side of that pillar there. Pillar. So just come down that pillar there like that. Wet your brush, pull it away. It doesn't want to be hard line. It just wants to be pulled away and a soft line. You're just sort of creating a feeling of light and dark. A few little flicks just underneath. And a sort of nothing extravagant, but a sense of a little windows here and there as you're going down. That looks really strong, but believe me, it is wet and it will dry paler. So you're just putting in a little sense of shadows and a little sense of architecture just under that angled gable end there. Excuse me. And a sense of, using just the greys again, just a sense of windows and doors going down into the background. So you just little hints while it's just damp, little hints into there like that. I think that's fine. You've got a sense of shadows. You've got a sense of the sun hitting parts of the building and create shadow. We'll obviously darken down the inner arch when that's dry. We'll darken that down. I might just flick a little bit of edge under there like that. Sorry, I've got some blue paint on the brush there. Right, come up to here and just tone this white down using a bigger brush, and just get a little bit of your yellow ochre mix you've been using. And just blend that in. Water it into the blue. Take it across the top. You leave a little sense of light across the top like that. And just blend that into there. And all you're doing really, we can suggest we're going to have balcony coming around there. But what you don't want is that to be bright white and dominate the picture from one other side. Let's have a look where we are with it. Zoom out a bit. So I think that's looking fine. You've got this darker areas down here. We've got space for people in here. We'll put people in, leave some whites catching the heads. Tram, and then we'll put some more detail into here. Balconies, etc. in underneath here. And figures, and I think this is all right. What you'll do with this is you'll just, when it's dry, you'll just get a rigger and you'll just suggest the tram lines and a few edges of the path. If you touch it now, it'll run like mad. You can put a sense of pathway just down there, which is just going to curve round that corner. I wouldn't touch this as yet because it's still soaking wet. And these bits here that's running, we'll put some sharper edges tomorrow with balconies to create like sharper edges and make it stand out, and the lamp, and make it just lift it away from the background. I think that's still wet, so I'm going to leave that till tomorrow and got the picture. So yesterday we put the darker area down here, put the light, and we dragged in some nice sort of flicks of shadows. And then we painted right round the awnings to leave them nice and bright. We might colour one of them. I think some of them look a bit red, so I might put a bit of colour into some of them. Put this down, left this white. We might have to put some figures in and paint in between them a bit. Started on the tram. Got this to do and this to do. I'm going to do this side first, get this down, and then gradually, morning Janet, you're right, and then gradually move over to the other side. We need to do the castle. Now, there's a lot, I'll just zoom in, there's a lot of there's a lot of pencil work here because I drew it in heavier, so there's quite a bit of pencil work. So afterwards I'll get a soft putty rubber and get rid of some of this pencil work. Don't need to get rid of it all, but it was just because I was drawing it in heavy. Normally I wouldn't draw it in as heavy as that. So first of all, we're going to suggest some shadows and underneath balconies over here, and maybe put a little bit more strength in the tops of the windows. So you don't need a small brush. This is just like that sort of size into there, and I've zoomed in as far as I can zoom in. If I go any nearer with this iPad, it actually starts to blur. So we're going to use the sort of the blue, French ultramarine, burnt sienna, a bit of crimson to create a little bit darker shadows underneath the balconies. Otherwise, if you don't have some stronger shadows here and there, then the light doesn't work. So you need to make them a bit stronger. So I'm just going to mix some French ultramarine. I'll tell you, I was thinking at one point, at one time, because quite a few of you keep asking questions, sending me emails about things. One time we could actually do, I could get a clean piece of paper and just you could chat. I think I can actually fetch you in on some. If you're willing to Skype, I can actually fetch you in on this, and we can chat a little bit and ask questions, and I'll try and explain things, just as though we were actually live in the art class. Morning, Claire. You all right? You're late. We've been here for hours. Right, all we're going to do, Claire, is just create some stronger shadows under these balconies. So I've mixed in some French ultramarine, crimson, bit of burnt sienna. Just leaning it more towards the warmer side with the sienna and the crimson, rather than being too blue there. And this sort of size brush. I know there's no shadow in the very top of this, but I think we'll put one in. Hi Dawn, you alright? We're just about to start painting. So French ultramarine, burnt sienna, crimson, and just create a stronger shadow just up here to suggest the eaves like that. And then you can come down, and then there's a little sort of balcony just underneath, so you can just put a flick for the balcony and just fetch it out a little bit. And then you've got another one just down there, just flicking out. Now what you do now is just get a little bit of watery yellow ochre. In fact, you should have had that ready earlier. I told you to have it ready earlier. A little bit of wet yellow ochre, and just soften down from them so they don't stay dark, and just sort of flick them out as though it's creating a bit of softer shadow. Don't allow it to dry as a hard line. Just soften it out to create a sense of shadow just underneath these balconies. Now, as I'm going to work down, I'm going to just drop in some darker colouring into these tops of these windows. Just a little bit more strength, I think, on them. Just a little bit stronger with the colouring. And just into the tops. Excuse me. Just suggest a little bit more strength, and then just water it down the right hand side a little bit, so you're creating a sense of shadow inside. And another little one just there. You don't need to make these too strong. And then you've got some smaller ones while we're up here. You've got some coming above this balcony here, so you've got some windows coming just down here like that. Keep these very narrow because the perspective is it's away from you, so don't make them too strong. Right, darken under this balcony just here. I know they're white, but you've got to have artistic license on these things. So darken underneath here, pull it out a little bit so it's a bit broader, because you're looking up underneath it like that. I'm just going to drop a little bit more dark into that one. Just going to drop a little bit more into it so it does have a... Remember all the time, this is very wet washes, so they will dry paler, which you can see from yesterday how pale they've dried. And then just soften it down underneath with a little sense of yellow ochre. Don't go right to the end, just soften it down here. Leave the ends, sorry, I'm just going to tie that end up. Leave the end sticking out and soften it that way over to the right. Now you've got some windows down there. Just do the same as what you did up there. That's still wet there. Just sort of drag in a little bit of dark into the top. That's wet over there where I've done that wash. A little bit of dark in the top, just to suggest like a darker feel of the walls, like the gap above the windows, just darkening them down a little bit. And then there's some smaller ones here which we sort of suggest. It's all down to suggestion, and your perspective is running down, so angle them down. And then you can go under these window frames. I'm slowing down now, so you can go under these window frames, and because I realise I'm rocking away here, and just suggest a little bit of an edge to these windows. So you can just pull in a little suggestion of edge on them, and do the same principle. Get a bit of wet yellow ochre and just sort of bleed them down a little bit so they don't become too prominent. These will dry quite pale. Come down to this next set and just darken the tops again the same way. Now you start, as you're coming down, your perspective starts to change, like I explained yesterday. They're all angling down to imagine a point here, because we stood on the top of a hill here coming down. So you imagine your eye line being about here, and each area should aim towards that eye line. That's your perspective, and it's basically all a matter of keeping the windows narrow, because you're looking down at a long angle at them, especially them at far away, and having the perspective change so as they're getting down here, and the baseline of your balcony is going to the same point, so everything is going down to the same point, the same eye line. Just darken that a little bit down. Right, come over here, just suggest some windows above this balcony here. They're more like doors, you know, like patio door type things. I'm saying patio doors. Into there, just down to the balcony, just darken slightly under the balcony, and then you've got one or two coming down here, so you've got one or two, just very narrow. Don't try and make them too prominent. And then you've got these which are a low line, and the same principle applies. They start to rise a fraction up to aim towards there. So it's just a matter of emphasis on some of these windows, like that, and just soften them down the right hand side so you get an inner feel to the window frame. I may put a little suggestion of windows. I'm going to just put something in here. I don't know, but I'm just going to put something in here just to break that gap up. I'm not putting them in dead strong, but I'm just putting something in there. You don't have to paint every window exactly the same, so I'm just trying to fill that gap a little bit so it doesn't become too lost. Right, so you now go underneath this big balcony here. You've got just above the shutters there, so you can get a little bit more burnt sienna and blue, a bit stronger, a bit more burnt sienna and a little bit more crimson, so it's just stronger, and just suggest just above the awnings there and underneath the balcony, you're just suggesting, actually put a line in to suggest the underneath of the balcony, and then just pull some windows down just above the awnings. Just pull them. They look really strong, but they're quite wet, so they will dry paler. In fact, what you can do, get a wet brush and just run a damp brush just underneath, so it feels as though they're coming out from shadow under there. So just a damp brush. That looks really strong, but they will dry a lot paler on you. And you can do the same going along a bit farther down here, just a little bit lower down. Just suggest the start of underneath some of these balconies and little suggestions of windows just down. Just a couple of flicks. When you get down to this level, just a couple of flicks. Right, I'm going to put a reddish blind in one of these. So I'm just going to get a bit of red I know there's not one there. I'm just going to get a bit of cadmium red. I'm just going to suggest an awning. Wait a second, catch up. Hi Brian, hi Anne, hi Jennifer. Sorry if I'm not ignoring you, I just don't see you popping up there. It's just because I'm concentrating on my work. Right, so I'm just going to put a red blind in there, just as though there's a one just dropping down there. Just drop a bit stronger red in. It might not come out all the way. These sort of awnings here, they bent over, so you want to give a suggestion. They folded down a little bit. So they use the same blue burnt sienna you've been using and crimson, but a lot more water into them, and just suggest the fold a little bit darker. That's better. Just suggest the fold in down there as though they just folding down at the edges a little bit. That's it. These are all right, but what you can do is this, using the same colour, you can cast a shadow onto one of them that would come off another one. So you would have a shadow just sort of crisscrossing here onto, say, that one from that one. Do you understand? So if that one there is flicking a shadow onto the ones just below it, like that. I'm going to move over now to this side and then come back and detail it in. So I'm going to put in with a smaller brush, I'm just going to put in the actual interior of that arch there. So I'm just going to use the same colours, blue burnt sienna, move the palette in a little bit, blue burnt sienna but stronger, a little hint of crimson, a little bit stronger, and just suggest the inside of that archway. You can use a finer brush and just create the odd flick here and there, just across the top way like that, just the odd bit. Don't it'll dry paler, so don't overdo it. And then I'll just hold the paper down because it's springing, and then just paint the interior of the arch, leaving the light through the archway. Don't lose the light totally. Drop a bit of brown into there because it's a bit blue, so I'm just going to drop a bit of burnt sienna in. That's better. And just water that down to just above the top of your edge there. Just the odd flick here and there, just to suggest some darker bit. That's fine. That'll dry paler, but it'll leave you with a sense of the darkness inside. The rest of this I'm not bothering touching. I think it's fine. I think we've got the idea of light and shade in there. So what I'm going to do now is suggest some stronger bits into here, balconies, etc. So you can darken down under that roof, and you're using just the same, your blue and burnt sienna and crimson, and you can darken down under that roof like that. So tease it out as though there's guttering there. Get a bit of wet yellow ochre and just pull some wet yellow ochre down from that into the shadow side, and then drag a sense of shadow as though there's shadow coming. You can even put pandials in, you can even drop a sense of that, but a sense of shadow coming through there. So you've just a little bit of blue in, can you see? So you're just creating the illusion of shadow onto that side there. Darken down. I've got a bit of white there which I don't like. Just lose that bit of white and emphasize that edge. So lose the little patches of white into there. Create a darker edge just here underneath, as though there's a balcony coming out and round that corner. So you're just turning the balcony outwards level with your eye, and then downwards, very strong downwards, because you're aiming the same as these are aiming. That's aiming. The higher anything is up from your viewpoint, the more stronger line it comes down. So you're coming down there like that, and then just pulling it level and flicking the shadows in like that. Right, now you can get a finer brush, very fine. Doesn't have to be too fine. That's mainly because I can't find one. Right, I would use now a bit of Payne's grey, or a little bit of black even. Payne's grey. If you're really worried about drawing fine, I mean, I'm not bothered, but if you wanted to, you could actually use a black pen if you wanted to make them dead neat. But I'm not worried too much about dead neat. So you've got a nice balcony coming down there like that, coming out from the side, and then turning and going round the corner a little bit like that. And that comes down. Now, to save you having to paint straight lines, you can make this look more like wrought iron. So you can just flick in some wrought iron effects. Like that down there. That's all right. You don't have to. Nothing has to be complicated on these. It just needs to be suggested. Just trying to move up the paper a little bit. Right, you can do the same as what we did over here. You can slightly darken into some of the windows at the tops. Again, watching your perspective, your angle. You just slightly darken them. You don't need to paint dark all the way down. It wants to get lost. It wants a feeling of getting lost. And this is just Payne's grey. I'm just going to get a finer brush, because that's just coming out a bit too thick for me. I think I can get a fine brush. Right, so Payne's grey again, and we'll put the balconies in here. Now, actually afterwards, if you wanted, you could get a bit of white and just pick out a little bit of highlight on these balconies. So it's just, the angle is quite tight up there, so you've got the angle quite tight up there like that. And then you're just literally flicking in some wrought iron. And I think we may, at the end, I might use a little bit. Remind me if I forget. I might use a little bit. That's quite wobbly wrought iron there. And it wants to be a bit stronger on that side, because it's getting too not enough angle there. It wants to be stronger up there. Right, so you're using the same fine brush. Go back to the other brush. The other brush was better. And we're just going to create, with the Payne's grey, you're just going to create, these were sort of arched a little bit, so you're just going to create the sense of an arched area just in there, with just a little sort of flick round the tops. That's all you need. Don't bother going down the bottom. If you wanted to put a balcony, there isn't one, but you could put a balcony down there if you felt you needed one. We've got them doors in there. Now we've got the lamp here. So just a little bit of Payne's grey, and just flick the lamp in. Just a few little dots and dashes. Don't try and make it dead neat. Leave the interior. If you didn't get that white, if you painted right over it, you can. There's nothing stopping you darkening it down and making it a darker sort of feel rather than bright light, bright white there. Little sense of the stand just underneath, like that. I think you can, when that Payne's grey is dried, I think you can tone that down a little bit so it's not too bright. And then we had now the balcony was about here, but I'm just going to raise it up because I've got a blob of paint out here. So I'm just going to make the balcony fit there. So I'm just going underneath. If you're painting like this type of stuff, you don't need to be dead exact, because it's all about trying to create atmosphere rather than accuracy. It's all down to just mood. I can't tell you how many times I've sat and painted doing exhibitions outside, and somebody's come up to me and said that window doesn't belong there. There isn't a window in there, or there never was a window there. And they tend to be the loudest people. They like to hear themselves talk. Right. And I think what you'll do is just use a slightly broader brush, a bit of water and just soften down from that into the into that area, so that looks as though there's blobs of white there, but it's just the water and just the reflection. I'm just going to touch in a little bit of yellow ochre into this lamp across the top so that it's not standing out as bright. So I'm just going to run a little bit of yellow ochre into there and just tone it down a little bit. I think that's better. It looks bright at the moment, that's just because the lamps are on it. And you can put another balcony if you wanted just down here, but you've got to remember, this is all paint, you've got to remember the same principle. It just needs to be wider there and softened out a bit. Sorry, I just keep adjusting things. Right, if you put a balcony down here, it wouldn't be coming down like that, it would be coming along like that to aim to this point again. So you put a balcony here, just a smaller one, and it would, instead of aiming down, it would be aiming across to here, so it would be like that. And you wouldn't see it as dark underneath because you're not looking up underneath it. And you can paint the framework in, and just a few sort of little flicks. Just into there, sharpen up the tops of these windows that's coming down. It's like French window feels. So it's just coming down into it. You can create a little bit of shadow under there, just so it doesn't stand out just too loose. You're not seeing underneath it, but you can create a little sense of darkness underneath. Flick into these windows and just give them an edge. They're different sizes, there's some taller. And again, don't feel the need to take them all the way down, just wet them out. And then you can create some darker patches just underneath here. I know there was a couple of red signs, we might have to put them in, like stop signs, or we might have to put them in with some gouache afterwards. But you can create the sense of windows coming down here, like that. I'm quite happy with that alone there. We need to make a darker window down here, so just a slightly broader brush, and I want to suggest a darker. There's a lovely shop just farther up here, just up here, that had they have a special pottery style. I'm forgetting the name now. There's a particular artist does it, and you get cockerels and all sorts of plates, all in these vibrant colours. And Joe must took with the one which was a cockerel, and it was superb. And so we bought that in that shop there, and it's standing in the kitchen. I nearly knocked it over. I'd have got murdered if I had. But yeah, it's beautiful pottery just up there. Right, stop rambling. Get a darker blue crimson, even add a bit of Payne's green if you can't get the strength. Wait a second, I'm just going to put my brush out and fetch my paints in a little bit. And you're just going to create a sense of darker shop windows just down here. So you can go around like that. And remember, you're starting to aim upwards now. You're starting to aim upwards. You can go around like that, an odd flick here and there. And then you can just pull down. I'm going to add a bit of Payne's grey because it's quite dark there. Now, you're getting, wait a second, see if I can tilt it. There you are. Can you see it's just dark? It's just, all you, there you are, it's darker there. What you see when I light flat is the water and the reflection of the lights. So I'm just going to darken that down, and then I'm just going to leave a gap to suggest a framework between the window and darken it down here out of sight. And then I'm just going to blend that watery into this pathway where the white is, so that the white doesn't show so much. A few flicks just to suggest little bits of need. And then when we put these couple of figures in, we'll blend them, especially ones in the shadows, I'll blend them into the picture. So that's really, apart from putting some figures in there, that's all you actually need over that side. Can you see? So you don't need a lot of detail. It needs to be shaded and it doesn't want to be attracting the eye. This is where your focus is, around this area. We'll make this stronger underneath. Right. You can now come over and start doing bits of ironwork and balcony sides over here. Now again, use a fine brush and a little bit of Payne's grey. Don't make them too obvious, just a few lighter flicks, and just remember you're going the angles, you're going down, a little bit of wrought iron down there, a little bit of wrought iron there, and then it turns towards the wall like that, so it fixes to the wall like that. And what you would actually get, wet your brush a bit, what you would actually get is a shadow cast onto the wall of them bits like that, just a little bit of watery through the shadow. Come down to the front and just put your balcony. Do you want flowers over some of these? I'll tell you what I will, I'll put some flowers in because we like flowers. So I'll just paint them in very quick. You can do a little flick underneath to suggest the edge, like that. And then some very narrow ones up here. So there's a one just here. Out into the light, up against the wall, bit of shadow off it. And then just a few little flicks of wrought iron. And just a sense of the darkness underneath it. I'll do this one and then I will put some foliage in. So we'll put a one just here, along there, down there, across the top of it, down there at an angle. Fetch it out from the wall so it looks prominent. It wants to feel as though it's coming out from that distant wall. And then just flick that in. And then again, just a sense of a watery shadow just cast off it a fraction. That looks quite a bit strong, that. I think it might fade down, but it just looks a bit stronger than what I wanted it. I'll tell you, I'm going to put some flowers in. Is it begonias or bougainvillea or something? Bit of cadmium red. We'll add a bit of slash of colour in here and there. So imagine there's some flowers just overhanging the top of here. So this is cadmium red. Not all the way along, just in, and then just sort of dot it in and make it hang down a little bit. So it's hanging down over the balcony a fraction. Odd dot of looser blooms here and there. And what we'll do with that is we'll scrape them back a little bit so they don't become too bright. Now, because they're sticking out a bit, just get a little bit of blue and crimson and just suggest shadow off that area, dappled onto the wall as though they're sticking out and casting a shadow back here and there. Put it in dots and then just wet it in places so that it softens it. So you just put it in dots and then you wet it and soften it. So you're just creating a sense of shadow coming off that. And what I'll do with them is I'll scrape them so that they get a little bit more light back into them. Do one or two just over here, not too busy, but just one or two just into there. Just sort of slightly hanging down. Just dropping, and again, a little bit of blue and crimson, and just suggest a shadow underneath, cast onto the wall. Dawn, I'm going to have to go at this one once I've got some watercolour paper. I managed to get the tiger on rough, thick sketch paper. I've sent a picture of the. All right, I'll have a look at it. Yeah, it's paper. I'm waiting for some paper as well. I've still got plenty for doing this, but I wanted the thicker arches rough for doing some big ones. Like this 300 pound 600 grams paper. Right. I'll tell you what I'm going to do. I'm just going to blur through that a little bit because I find it just a little bit too heavy. I think I'm just going to blur into it a little bit with a damp brush to tone it down a fraction. Just drag some wet into the. I don't know what's pinging. Ah, it's our Lynn chatting to my wife. That's what's pinging. Stop pinging, Lynn. Right, that's fine. So come down to the balconies down here. There's odd little ones just here. There's a couple of smaller ones just sort of sticking out. Stop it, Lynn. So you've got one or two just little ones. So you've got like a couple of little flicks here, like that, down. And just going back on itself just there. And then just joining into some window frames just there. Strange looking things. They're just smaller edges. Put them in and then just wet underneath them with a bit of water to create a sense of shadow of them, like that. Right, there's a bigger finer balcony down here. So wet paint's grey, and it just comes up here, so it comes across this area, comes out from the wall like that, and then along upwards perspective wise, right, and then down, and it's it's down in sort of 3 or 4 blocks, so it's like that. Then there's a slight gap. If you really want them to be dead neat, you can take your time, but neatness is not what we're going for. And that comes down to just above the white above there, so there's a sense of light just before that shadow just there. Goes back into there, up against the wall, and then a few flicks down there. So they want to come all the way down to there. Right. Wet your brush and create some shadows of this. Underneath, pull some shadows down. I'm going to drop a couple of flowers in there, not much, but I'm just going to drop a sense of 1 or 2 little flowers just here and there. That's it. Now then, there's finer balconies as you go along, but just keep them loose. There's a one at the end here, just underneath that one. So there's one there. Again, you're rising now. So there's one there, like that. Fetch it out so it sticks out a bit, and then wet your brush and shade just underneath it. Shade underneath it and off to the side a little bit. Then you've got another one just fine above there, about the same height as that, I would think. No, maybe a fraction higher. Just coming above that shop window. Take it along the side a bit. wet your brush and create some shadows off it. Throw it like that. Right. I think that's fine. I just think that one looks as though it's getting thicker to the bottom instead of thinner, so it wants to be thickened out up this side a little bit. That's all right. Right, so we've got these balconies underneath here. Now what we're going to do is paint underneath these awnings and create a sense of shop. So get your blue, burnt sienna and crimson, but more on the warmer side, so a bit more crimson and burnt sienna in than blue. Right, come underneath your awnings and you're just sort of going to flick in and work it down. So you're going to try and leave gaps to suggest that there's sort of bits in the doorway. So you go underneath that awning and it's sticking out. So you don't fetch the dark right to the outside edge because the awning is out. So you fetch it farther in and you just put, wait, what's balanced up, I suppose, with that. The window's coming down like that into there. Suggest that one coming down just below it. So just leave a gap and suggest the next one coming down just below it like that. And the next one. Got them in. There's one there as well. Might as well have that one in. Right, now what you do is just get a little bit of yellow ochre, a little bit of burnt sienna in there, so it's just a little bit more browner, and you just carry these darks down. They look strong still, but they aren't. It's just the water. Carry these darks down, and then start leaving little patches, so that you feel as though there's something going on in there. And we'll put some figures in here as well. Now what you do is you get a little bit of water now and you just sort of slash some shadows through into this area here so that it doesn't jump out so much. You're just wetting the paint while it's wet and just creating a sense of stronger, I'll just make it a bit darker just there, a sense of stronger shadow just coming out from underneath them blinds down into there. Can you see, because it's wet there, can you see like that, just this stronger shadow being cast across there. Right, so carry on along and do the same along here. So imagine one coming from underneath, so you darken down just underneath there, down that side of that awning. Don't go right to the end again, like I said, just take it out and then just pull down, the same sort of principle, leave an odd gap here and there and pull down some stronger window frames. Thank you, Elizabeth. Do the same here. As long as you're doing it quickly, you'll it'll not dry on you. All you're doing is leaving an odd little bit of light in between to suggest window frames, etc. But we've got to be aware we want to put people in, so don't come too far down. Now do each one, then just get a damp brush and just wet through them again at an angle. Just wet through them, so you're creating that illusion of shadow and light getting through in places. So parts that gets left are where the light's getting through the blinds onto there. If you wanted, there's nothing stopping if you wanted colouring the blinds a little bit. I put a red one there and I think I'll just make it a little bit stronger. Just a slash of colour coming out there, so it's just a little bit more strength to that blind. But you can colour any of them if you fancy it, and then just carry on down and go underneath these ones here. Remember that's casting a shadow onto there, so fetch it down lose that little bit of white which isn't necessary, fetch it down there, fetch it from the same continuation from under there and down, and only go so far because we want to put people in, so only go so far. Into these areas, wet your brush and do the same, a few slashes of shadow. Just going to tidy that bit up there. Going to fetch that red blind out just a little bit more and wet it a bit just there. Yeah, that's alright. A little bit of red down there. So we'll come back and we'll create these people into there when we do these people. Right, so a smaller brush, and we'll just suggest a sense of figures or something down there. So your blue, burnt sienna, crimson, you use this a lot because it gives you warmer darks. And just put in a feeling of very small figures going down the bank there. Just a little dot, leave a gap for a shoulder. These are way down this bank, so they don't want to be too big. Maybe a little bit bigger. Sorry, I've just blurred that a bit. I'll let that dry because I've just blurred it out a little bit too much. And then one or two farther down the bank again. Can I zoom in a bit on that? Yeah. So just one or two suggestions of people going down past this pathway. Darken just above the roadway there and put some darker patches in all around to suggest little bits of stuff going on. There was a vehicle here, but I think I decided to miss it. I suppose you could suggest it and leave it in, so a little sense of window frame there. Bit of water and sort of slash it out. It's just a matter of giving a sense of something being down there, like that. Right, tram. I'll come across to the tram. Get your Payne's grey. Get your Payne's grey. It's our Lynn. All the pinging you hear is our Lynn and my wife just chatting on. I think I can't figure out how to stop it. Wait a second. See if I can quit the software that they're using. Difficult when you've got them chatting. Right. Click just underneath the top of it, but just above the yellow. And you don't want a curved line, but you just want a sense that it's going round the corner. So just a fraction higher in the middle. And just dropping it down at the edges like that. And what you do is you thicken it out a little bit at the middle so it feels as though it's got a bit more shadow onto it, and you take it out at the edges. Now raise it up and put the darker part of where the sort of the connections are, the electric connections, like that. Across there. And then there's a little bit of paraphernalia just above that. So just a few flicks just above that, just to suggest the electric connections. Right. Don't allow that to dry on you, and get a wet brush. And just drag the wet brush into it and out to the side. Just leaving the looser bits at the top, but you're just wetting that down into there. Come down for the windows. Now, the windows don't want to be beautiful. Get a little bit of wet Payne's grey. A slight curve at the top, slight curve at the top like that. Suggest the doorway to the right hand side a little bit. Like that. And then just with a bit of watery yellow ochre, pull that doorway down level. And just lose it at the side. Bit of stronger yellow ochre. Just come to the bottom of the window, underneath the window, leave a gap and just suggest the little bits of lines that's just underneath like that. Now come back to your windows, and this is where you don't want to paint in too much detail. Come back to your windows, a little bit of watery Payne's grey. Darken down with this watery Payne's grey from your window top edges. Just coming together quite close. Quite close, you're just leaving a narrow gap between them. This is just wet Payne's grey. Round to that one. That's fine. Now then, come to the bottom, just above the little lines you've just put in, and just come to the bottom and darken down into the bottom of the window like that. Wet your brush and push that upwards a little bit. Now get a broader brush, and what I want you to do here is just with a watery brush, is just drag through this like that with a couple of slashes like that. So you're dragging actually into your yellows, and you're just blurring them windows off a little bit and leaving just it slightly darker at the top, so you're leaving lighter patches. When it's dry we can maybe add a suggestion of darker patchy, but I didn't want to. This isn't a painting that's meant to be all neat. It's meant to capture atmosphere. Now what we've got here is too much light down here between the tram and the wall. So I want to do the same thing. I want to just get the watery blue and burnt sienna and crimson, very wet, very watery. And I'm just going to darken into them. You might not have it, it all depends on where you got. You might not have them dark a bit, so I'm just going to darken into there like that. Take that white out and just suggest little bits going on over there. And then I'm going to actually use the same colouring and just come out and across the tram a little bit. And just dragging some colour out across the tram so it doesn't become too separated from its shadows. Blur it in a little bit so it blurs into the background, and just leave some light obviously on the other side. Now get a smaller brush, using a dark sort of bird sienna yellow ochre, and just go around the outside of the lamp. Just round the sort of the bottom and the right hand side like that. Maybe it could have done with being a little smaller. And just create the shadows away from that as well. Broaden your brush and just dry your brush off and just blur that out. Just a little bit, just a bit too strong there, so you just blur that out a little bit. Add a little bit of brighter yellow, just a little sense of brighter yellow to the right fraction. Tidy edges, a little sense of the brighter yellow in here and there. I think I still need when it's dry, to darken that patch down. I don't like that patch. I want a bit darkness down there to make the tram look as though it's across there. Right, I'm going to leave that to dry a fraction before I put the bottom part in. What you've got now as well, oh, there's a lamp over that side, wasn't there? There was a lamp, and we've lost the white for the lamp. Never mind. A little bit of Payne's grey with a fine brush, and just suggest the lamp coming out the wall over there. You can use a bit of gouache afterwards. Don't make it too big, it's meant to be farther down the street. You can use a little bit of gouache afterwards just to put some light into that lamp. I'm just going to put a flick of Payne's grey in there to suggest there's a little bit of flick off that blind. Right. Allow this to dry. What you need to do now, and this can be disastrous or it can be wonderful. It's probably going to end up disastrous when I'm showing. I'm going to just put the electric cables, the connections in, and I'm going to use wet Payne's grey, but I'm going to use a longer brush so that it's just flicked. It needs to be very wet and watery so that it moves quite easily. And all you're doing now is just suggesting the electric, so just plopping this bit down here with the point. I'm trying to get nearer and I feel frightened to get nearer. There you go, with the point. And if you do it more loose than trying to be delicate. So if you do it like that in flicks, it'll look more natural than if you're trying to paint it dead neat and slow. So it's coming up here. It's actually coming from down here. So you can. I would start just there. You've got a joint just there. So start with a little joint just there, and then flick down quite quickly to that point there. Flick up here. Try and hit the joint, and then there's a few bits just flicking out to the left there and over to this side. Just strengthen that one down a bit. Otherwise it wouldn't run. It needs to be connected, and I think if you do it loose enough, it doesn't matter if it's not dead straight. The whole idea is you're just getting that feeling of the electrics in. Come back to your windows now, and just darken them slightly down a little bit. They're still wet. Just drop more darks in the top area a little bit, and an odd slash across. Stronger Payne's grey, and just come down the side of that tram and make it look as though there's a door entrance just off there, and that gets rid of that white there. If you wanted to put the drivers in, which side would the drivers sit on these? Can you see on the photograph? He's in the middle, isn't he? Is that the driver? Hard to tell. Looks like it might be him in the middle. Alright, I'll put him in the middle. What you've not got to do is paint a figure in as much as just a sense of a shadow and a shape. And I think that's all you need for that. Now you can come down now with your Payne's grey. You can sharpen round the edge of your lamp a little bit. Like that. You can paint them little lines in underneath just a fraction sharper. You've got to be careful now that you don't get bogged down with too much detail, which I could be guilty of doing. Right, underneath the tram, Payne's grey. So you're coming from the edge across like that, fetching it inwards. So you're fetching it inwards and then taking it out a little bit. And this can be dark Payne's grey, so you're fetching it in and out again across the edge. Now you've got to leave a sense of light just underneath, not too much so it looks as though it's too high up, but just leave sort of a sense of light underneath, and then fetch the tram wheels down like that, and then just wet from there outwards and just create a shadow outwards like that. So you just join that into there like that. I'm going to get some wet yellow ochre, and I'm just going to darken this tram down on this side a bit so it doesn't become too bright. I'm just going to blend these darks in and just create a little bit more shadow onto that side of that tram. Don't want it to be pretty, I just want it to be, and I don't want it, I'm just going to water that away. I don't want this tram to jump out too much from the left hand side, so I'm just wetting in that dark doorway that we put in and just pulling outwards and away a little bit, and then you can suggest the pathway coming down off that like that. It's got to feel as though it's part of the picture and not jumping out, so you've got to blur this in so it's part of the picture. Make the shadow underneath a bit stronger. I think that's better. Figures. So I can come over now to the right hand side and we can put some figures in. So when they're under the blinds, they're in shadow obviously, so you're just going to use your blue, crimson, burnt sienna in whatever combinations really, and you're just going to suggest some figures sort of in down here, not too big because they're down the bank a bit from here, so underneath the blinds, and just drop a head in, leave a gap, suggest a body, pull it down a bit, drag a leg in, and then just leave another leg, just not that floating, but just that's better, just off a little bit, and you've got to join them to the ground with shadow. So you've just got to join them onto the ground with shadow, and you can make some a bit taller. So add a bit of burnt sienna here and there and make one feeling as though he's a bit farther up the street, so he would be just slightly bigger here. So I'm just adding more burnt sienna to it and making this person bigger. And just dragging some legs. The legs don't need to be finished off properly. They just need to feel as though they are moving. One or two farther down. Well, you've got little posts just coming round here, just at the edge. You can suggest one of them posts coming round at the edge of the pavement there. And when you do them posts in, just pull a bit of shadow out from them. Right, smaller people now just getting farther down. If you wanted some to look as though they were coming out into the light a bit, where that lighter areas, you can make them a little bit of colour. So you can make them just a little bit of blue here and there. So you can just add a little sense of colour into some of them. Drop a little bit stronger blue on the right hand side so it blurs together a little bit. Again, shadow. Another person just next to him. A little bit of yellow. I'm just going to actually just slash in with a bit of yellow into this person here, just to lighten them up a little bit on the right hand side, on the left hand side, sorry. Just a little hint of light here and there, and then just a bit of burnt sienna, and you can put somebody stood next to him walking down. Join them up. Broader shoulder. Always sort of make a shoulder one side more than the other, and then just a few flicks of the legs down. Carrying a bag. You're always carrying bags. And then a sense of shadow to join them to the ground. Somebody just going round the corner there. Like that. I think we need some more figures just in here. And if you once you've put the figures in, if your window frames aren't standing out a bit, you can drag in the odd line here and there, just to give it a sense of it. But don't make it come all the way down. Make the shadow, when you've got these people in, make the shadow go along and then up the wall a little bit. Just wet it up so it feels as though you're casting a long shadow and it's just going up the wall a fraction. We'll put a couple, there's posts here, but I think I'll put a couple of people in here. So I'm just going to use a little bit of yellow ochre. And just imagine these people are coming up about here, so about that sort of strength. Just put it in yellow ochre first, like that. Get some blue burnt sienna and just go down the right hand side and just give them a sense of shadow. We're going to use a little bit of white gouache on the shoulders and the heads, just to lift them up from the background into there like that. Just darken that leg down, so you darken into that way, little sense of shadow off them like that. And I'll put a companion. The looser you can paint this, the better it is. It gives us more sense of movement. So the looser you can paint them, rather than being too precise, the more sense of movement. I'm going to put one more in just to fill that gap there. So I'm just going to put balanced in between them. We'll put somebody coming up the street. Not all going down the street, but somebody coming up the street. Like that. And then afterwards you can put a slash of gouache in, just to lift the faces and the heads out. So a little bit more watery shadow off that particular couple there, just a little bit more shadow up there. A little flick here and there for the edge of the paving stones. I think they're alright. Like I said, we'll come back and use some white. Jennifer said nif me le me. I don't know what that means, nif le me me. Right, so we've got that in. These figures here are the sort of the bigger figures, and we want them to blur into the shadows. So just be quite strong at the top, so you can use a bit of Payne's grey if you want. And we might have to paint afterwards, might have to paint in between to separate them a little bit. So we've got the man standing here, quite strong. I'm using Payne's grey for his head, and I'm not going to leave white in between these because I want them to blur into the edge. I want them to blur into the picture, and we'll use some blue and he's sort of with this woman, so the woman, this woman is with this lady, so just sort of suggest her as well, join them together. See where the white is left? I have to tone that down afterwards. And she's just got a little bag down there, and you just, oh, you've been leaning on the keyboard. I wonder what that was. Right, so sense of elbow down here, darken them down, and I'm using Payne's grey and I'm bleeding them together. So she's got obviously shorts on, so she's got legs quickly down here. He's got trousers on. Blend them to the ground. Bit of water. In between here and here where the white is, we will have to tone it down. I maybe should have just painted it, blotted it out altogether, to be quite honest. So I'm just joining the legs up. She's got a bag there, a little sense of bag. Now let that dry, and then we'll turn around, and then we'll add a little bit of light of colouring into these figures, just to pull them together a little bit and make them jump out a fraction. He's actually too tall for these figures over here when I look at it. This street isn't as high as that. I'll tell you what. Get a bigger brush. Get a bigger brush. I've made him definitely too tall. This pathway wants to be down a bit. So get a bigger brush. Get some French ultramarine. Very wet. And just lose these people. Just slash into them and create doorways, etc. And then I'll tone them down. And I'm going to do the same with this over here. These figures were master tall. If you look at these figures here, it looks as though they were 3 foot higher than the others. I mean, I've sort of done that deliberately to show you how not to do these type of things. So I'm just going to slash into this dark down here with the sort of bluey grey wash and just lose the white and create the sense of doorways, etc. And I'm going to fetch the path down a bit. So I'm going to fetch the path down this way a fraction. So instead of being there, the pathway is coming round here. And then blur the pathway out. I'll save it, I promise you I'll save it, I'll get back to it. But it was too high. I had the path too high compared to this path here. So that's why I'm just blurring these out and mixing little bits of colours into them. Like that. Getting a nice dark down there. I didn't like them people anyway, they were a bit snobby. And round here, and just blur that out. I think that's better. I'll tidy some figures up into here afterwards. Actually, no, it's too tall. See, I had them up here and they were too tall. They want to be down here. They've got to match up with these figures. Maybe these figures could have been bigger. Maybe these should have been bigger, but if I make these smaller, that'll be fine. Right, get a fine brush, a rigger or something. We won't be able to put white. I suppose if you wanted, you could use some white acrylic and create the white lines. So wet Payne's grey, and just create the tram line. So from down there, they've got to get broader as they come up, so as they're coming up, just press on a little bit more and broaden them out. So fine there, but broaden them out and make it wider here as well. They've got to get slightly wider, and then because they've got double edges, you just need to sort of create another edge in there for the track to run into. Into there, and there's one going down there as well, so you've got on the other side you've got them going down, so down there it's just water this, and then down there getting wider up here and losing. And then you can just create a little sense. I'll just move out a bit so that you can see it all the way down. You can just create a sense of cobblestones here and there by just flicking across here and there. Very random shapes and some little flicks here and there down. just sharpen the edge of the pathway up a bit, fetch that down round, and just suggest the odd cobbles here and there. Just little flicks with a brush, so you're not just leaving it totally flat, you're just creating this. Now we can use, I probably might just use a little bit of white acrylic in there afterwards. What I'm going to do now is just sharpen up, sorry, swapping brush. I'm just going to sharpen up a little bit of watery Payne's grey and just darken the windows down a fraction. I think they might be just a bit too light. So I'm darkening them down across the top, but I'm not allowing them to dry hard before I sort of pull them down with a bit of water over to the corner. That's better, just taking it down a fraction. A little bit of sharp darker up here. Into there. Suggestion of figures there. Right, while we're waiting for that to dry, suggestion of figures there. Right, while we're waiting for that to dry, so I can put these figures in, we'll use a little bit of white to just pick out some edges. I'll just find me Stuart Semple palette. A fine brush. I'll get a different brush so that it's got a little bit of cleanliness about it. Right, and you can just create some little flicks of white here and there. I think where you might need them is, like I said, just up onto some of these top balconies edges, just across the edge here, so just a little flick of white gouache, just to lift them. The best way to do it is to soak your white so it's wet, and then you just pick out on the tip of the brush and just create that little sense of lighter line down there. So you're just emphasizing a little bits of the dark so it's standing out a little bit. Bit of white into the lamp. I don't like that bit, it's got a bit too bulky just there, so I'll just thin that out up there and broaden it a little bit there, and then just right, we need some light across the tops of where we've just blotted everything out, so we need to sort of I'll tell you what, we'll create a shop sign. Get a little bit of yellow, bit of cadmium yellow I think, add some white into it, and just create the sort of a sense of a shop sign here and there. Just Rick's Emporium. Don't try and paint words in, just create the illusion. It should get smaller as it goes over to the side. It just that sense, it'll cool down, it'll pale down, so it'll not be that strong. Now then, use the white with a finer brush. Use the white with a fine brush. You can have a little bit of the yellow in with it, it's fine. And you're just going to lighten up the figures over on the edges over here. So you're just going to go across the shoulders and just slash that bit of white in. Can I close in any more? Yes, I can. I'll just close in a bit more for you to see. So you can use the white with a fine brush. That's all I'm using, very fine brush. And just slashing the shoulders and maybe across the top of the head a little bit. So you're just lifting them away from the background, across the top of the head, across the shoulder. And this man coming up, we can lighten into his face and give him like a shirt front, like that. So you can just a little slash of colour, and you can go across the top of his head a fraction and his shoulders But just that slash of front there gives, and the slash interface gives the impression that he's coming this way. Across the top of the shoulders, across the top of the head. It needs to be wet, this, so that it runs off the brush, but it needs to be strong enough so it stays there. So across the top of that man's head, he was sort of farther up than this, so a little bit of shoulder, even a strap down with a bag down there. So bit by bit you're just fetching these figures out. These two are coming up. I've decided I made them lighter in the face and just sort of slashed a little bit into the fronts, so they look as though they're coming upwards. Just a touch on the shoulders of these people here. Just lifting them out. Slash of white across the windscreen a bit. That's fine. Slash of white where we put the lamp in, but obviously I had the tree in the road, so you can put that in. Do the same now with the tracks. So as the tracks are coming up, you want it just a little bit, but nothing too much, and just do a little bit of light into here, just getting broader. So just a fraction of light for the edge of the rails. Don't make it too specific, just a little sense of light, and broaden it out a bit as it comes up the page there. So you're just creating a little illusion of light catching into this. Don't think we need any more white up here. There's no white. There's some signs over there. There was a sign down there, wasn't there? A red stop sign or something. Put it in white like that. It'll tone down, allow it to dry a fraction, and then we'll just put a red edge round it to make it look. And you can suggest other signs if you want. You can put in little bits of signage here and there, so you can add a. I'm not going to. I've decided I'm not going to. I could. There's a one up here, but I think it would get too distractive up here. And there's a sign over there, but I think we're fine. I like this area. What I've got to do is make the figures over here in shade, but smaller. So what I've done is load the path. I had the path up here, and I've lowered the path down to here. So I'm going to get a little bit of the cadmium yellow. I'm going to add a little bit of the white gouache, the white, not gouache, the white paint into it. And I'm just going to suggest some figures just down here. But I'm going to try and balance them off a bit. They are bigger just slightly here because we upped the road a bit. But they don't need to be as big as what they were. They've got to be able to gain that tram for a start. So just highlight the top of the figure. Slash in a bit of shoulder. If we use the light to lift them out first of all. And then we can tone them down and fetch them in. I don't want them to be too strong over here. I want them to be lost into the shadows. So another one just getting a little bit taller here. Another thing with people is if you alter the shoulders so that there's more shoulder on one side than there is on the other, you have a feeling of movement. Look like aliens. I'm going to tone them down, don't worry about that, and then one or two just a bit farther down. Like that. And then we've got these two bigger ones up here. Now, for the bigger ones, I'm going to come back to these, don't worry. For the bigger ones, I want them to be in real shade. So I'm just going to get French ultramarine. Wait a sec. French ultramarine, like that. I'm going to add some white into the French ultramarine. so it stands out a little bit, and I'm just going to paint in a sort of an edge to the figures, so they want to be about here, not up there. So I'm just going to put in the edge of that lady's head, the edge of the man's head. Right, I'm going to get a bigger brush now, and what you've got to do with these is, using the blue, is just to drag them in, darken them down a bit, drag them in so that they become just shadows into the edge. Like that. Wet them out so that you just sort of soften and blend into the background, and then darken them down. Use a bit of Payne's grey and come to the shadow side of these figures and just tone them down. So they just become a blur into the background. I'm just going to darken down slightly behind her. Just going to darken down into here a bit more. Just tie them to the ground. And it's really all a matter of blending this in so it doesn't become too obvious. You just want a feeling. She's got a bag there. You just want a feeling of shadowy figures over here. You don't want them to be too solid. And then go back and tidy these people up so you can get a bit of burnt sienna, and you can just darken down these people that you've lifted out a little bit. You can just tone them, go into heads and just leave them a little sense of light on the top. A little bit darker. And just darken them down a fraction. So just over to the side a bit. Darken them down where you have lifted them out. Just darken them down. And join them to the ground. And then these people farther down. That's it. Once these are dry, these two, you can just get a blue, French ultramarine, and you can, if you make it sort of pure pigment, it need to be dry. It's still too wet. When it's pure pigment, you can actually slash through these and just create a little bit of light with the blue. I'll try mixing a bit of white in with it, see if it helps. That's my white gone now. I can't use the white now, it's gone. Yeah, and just sort of slash through them a little bit like that, just to lighten parts up. But don't make anything too distinct. I think he needs the legs to come down just a little bit. The whole idea of these figures is to make this look as though it's real dark shadow up here, and they are just in the shadow. I'm going, because I've got a bulk down there back, I'm just going to suggest that she's got a strap on her back. So I'm just going to get a little bit of cadmium yellow, if that helps, and just slightly just suggest it needs to be strong. It's very wet, so it's difficult to do. Just slightly suggest that there's a bag in there, so it's not as dark. So just a little bit of light and a sense of a strap going across. I think that's fine. I don't want them to be jumping out too much like that. I like them the way they are. Be a bit taller than the tram on the edge. So I'm just going to get a little bit of the cadmium yellow off here and just broaden it down this side a little bit, to feel as though you can see a little bit of that edge. and maybe a bit down that side. And I like the tram to be blurred into the picture. I don't want it to be jumped out. Might fetch it forward a bit. I won't ask you to put a dog on. Yeah, we've had a few dogs on. So again, as they are drying out, just get a blue. See if I can get one from here. You've got to allow it to dry, and you're just slashing some colour through here and there, just so you do definitely blur them figures in. I don't want, if you painted them too, in fact these people down here want to be in a bit more shadow as well, so I'm just going to use a little bit blue through them. And tone them down a fraction. What you don't want is these to be too strong competing. I think in reality these figures could have probably been a fraction taller. I'm going to make these a bit taller so they balance off a little bit more. So I'm just going to go into these two figures and make them just a bit broader. So I'm just going to broaden the shoulders out from them. In other words, obliterate the heads. Like that. Bit of burnt sienna and paint the heads just that bit higher. Darken the sides off a little bit. That's better. And then when they're dry, just use a little bit of white. I've got no white left because if you have a look, my white is now blue. I'll just dip into the edge and see if I can pick some white up. When they dry, I'm doing it now while it's wet, you would just emphasize the tops of the heads and the shoulders again. I think that's better. I think they wanted to be a bit taller, so it just balances it. But this, I'm happy with this just being blurred, so I'm just flicking some little bits of white and blue in, but not trying to make it too specific. You want to be in shadow. In fact, I think I'll zoom. I don't need that. I'll just zoom out a fraction. I think these figures want to be blurred into this background a bit more, so I'm going to get a bigger brush. I'm going to get me blue, stronger blue, bit of crimson and burnt sienna in there. And I'm going to darken this down a bit. I don't want any sense of light too much up here, so I'm just darkening this down into here like this, gradually wetting it out and fetching it out into the road surface a bit. You've got to fetch this dark up into the picture, so you've got to fetch it up into the picture like that. Drop more in, so you're darkening it down and blurring it down round the pathway. Dry your brush off, just tease it back a little bit, and then wet out this over to here. Wet out this over to here, making it slightly broader across the picture. So you're just darkening down this whole corner area so that you get a sense of really deep shadow, and these people coming from out of the shadow more than actually appearing. Get a razor blade. I had a razor blade somewhere, wait a sec. Get a razor blade and scrape into the flowers over the side there. My hands are wet. So scrape into the flowers, mainly across the top, but just scraping in putting pressure on them. So they don't jump out as red. So you're scraping away a lot of the pigment at the top. Just I'll zoom back in. So you're scraping away a lot of the pigment back to the surface of the paper. That's better. And just run water in there. So you just run water in, and it just sort of bleeds it together a little bit, but it doesn't make it as strong as what it was. I think that's fine. We've got the... I'm just going to put a slash of colour across that blind. I think the blind's probably a bit too strong, so I'm just going to get a little bit of bright yellow, very strong, and I'm just going to add a slash of colour into there so it just takes the dark out a bit more. I think that's better. You can carry on forever with these. I think I'm fine with it. I think they've caught the overall feel of it. I'll just move it out and put a mount round and see what it looks like. I can't zoom out any more than that. So I'll just put the mount round. You'll probably not see the bottom of the mount. Because with this, when I get my other camera going, I can move farther out, I think. Put the mount round, just clean it up at the edges. There you go. That's not too bad, is it? You can't see the bottom down here, but that's it. So you can see how I've sort of saved this a bit. I made these figures definitely too big over this side, so in the end I just washed them out and then just blurred them in, so they're in the shadow, and made these slightly a bit bigger so they matched up. Blurred the background so it stayed there. Strong shadow here so the focus is on the light. Left the blinds totally white. Put an odd red one in. I can't fit a dog in. If I put a dog in, it would go in about here with these people, but you wouldn't see it done. You wouldn't see the dog. I don't think they have dogs in Lisbon. So I think that's fine. These are all right. Make sure you don't make them too strong like I did. Scrape them well back so they just become a soft blur. In fact, they could be scraped back a little bit more, so they're just a soft blur. A little bit of greenery here. Still a way to go with yours, Elaine, is there? Yeah. Well, you've got to, no matter how you do it, you've got to try and be loose and not try and paint in highly detailed window frames. I used to make that mistake when I was trying to paint scenes from holidays, trying to paint them in exactly, and it doesn't look as atmospheric as if you're just quick and loose with it. Thank you, Janet. So I'm quite pleased overall with that, and that little bit of white in there helps the tram lines, and then you flick it. If you try painting dead neat these lines, you will end up painting them too thick or too straight. Just flick them in, and that's part of it. The blinds look nice. You don't need to suggest lots of detail into the shops themselves, just a little bit of blur, and a blur down here helps. Blur the figures out so they're not standing out over that side.